Good evening, punters, and welcome into another episode of the TryPod, where we break down every NRL game every week from a betting perspective. This week, we'll be deep diving through Origin 2. Queensland's taken a 1-0 lead. No one thought that was going to happen last week, and looking to finish the series in Game 2 down in Sydney. So we'll be previewing that tonight. Jacob, how are you, mate?
I'm good, thanks, mate. Sorry, I didn't realise Origin. I'm wearing my yellow for the Wallabies. I'm day one. You know I'm day one Wallabies. Did you watch the game last night?
No, I don't watch Union. It's a dead rubber. The only thing we can win is a dead rubber.
Yeah, but like desperate times, there's no weekend footy. And I will say one thing, the Wallabies got to win. But, man, they give a red card in Union for stuff that like wouldn't even necessarily be seen as a penalty in league. And it changes the game. It was quite crazy. But, yeah, as you guys know, Wallabies all day. We're going to get into Game 2 Origin, not too much, like not too long, but straight away I'll put our hands up and say we got our best bet in Game 1 wrong. We recapped that game already, and we spoke about the best bet and stuff on our Wide World of Punting podcast, which was last Thursday. So if you want to hear more of a recap of what was a phenomenal game, we spoke about it for 10 or 15 minutes. It's on YouTube, it's on Facebook, or go back to Thursday's pod in your pod feed. But obviously regarding that first game, Queensland, the line was like 7.5 all the way to 10.5.
Correct.
And Queensland, as we know, got the outright upset, and they're paying like $3.50.
Yeah, it was actually absolutely ridiculous. And coming from 10-0 down, I know a few of the guys in the group got on Queensland when they were 10-0 down at half-time, and they were getting about $12 odds for that one. So one of the more remarkable comebacks that we've seen, at least I've seen in recent history, and one of the more remarkable underdog stories, because, I mean, you know, anyone you talk to down at the pub or any average person gave Queensland no chance in that one.
That's right, and it's worth saying as well, straight off the bat, like, Queensland was actually down, I think, 8-0 in Game 1 last year, 2019, Correct. And that was a much more evenly matched series, although New South Wales were favourites in the series last year with a slightly stronger squad depth. And the identical final score of an 18-14 Queensland victory in Game 1. Game 2, they went over to Perth. New South Wales won 38-6, and I think it's worth starting there because if Queensland don't come in and try to match New South Wales' desperation, this is in Sydney, 40,000 people, 40,000 in the stands, this game won't be close. I'll tell you that now. And I do think maybe last year, the fact that Queensland have experienced leading the series but then ultimately losing might actually, while they'll be confident, that experience should hopefully guard them from complacency. But you and I know, we watch NBA and any sport where there's a series, psychologically, the team that is facing elimination or facing a series loss always has the motivation edge.
They definitely do. And I mean, you hear it all the time where people are like, well, they're professional sports athletes. They're going to put in the same amount every single game. It just isn't the case. And I know State of Origin's obviously a short 3-game series and really only 2 games, one more game for Queensland to get up for to finish it. But you're right. It's like the team facing elimination. And that's why you kind of always bet on that, revenge factor from a recent matchup, not only for the desperation factor facing elimination, but also the fact that you can make adjustments, and I think the losing team is always going to be not only more willing to make adjustments, but will look into what they can do differently in Game 2, and I think that's going to be a benefit to New South Wales, because I guess you'd assume Queensland will come out with essentially the same game plan that they did in Game 1.
Yeah, as a Queenslander, not being impartial, but as a Queenslander, I want them to come and rain hell on New South Wales, and what I don't want them to do is be a bit, tepid. I want them to come in and actually be aggressive and try. And even if New South Wales wins, I want Queensland to make New South Wales earn it and make them feel, now we're going to do it all again. I feel last year, they basically gave New South Wales a free roll in that second game, and they got such an easy win that then they could really dial in on Game 3. So no matter what happens, I hope that Queensland's going to basically throw the kitchen sink with nothing to lose. And there's something to be said. We saw in Game 1, Queensland did play without pressure. They played with a side that was playing to win. And as I said in the recap, I felt New South Wales kind of played to avoid the loss. Now, you've put up the line and total? Did you mention yet, for this game?
I can throw it up right now. I'll intro it. It's obviously the Blues are at home. They're 9.5 point favourites in Sydney. The total's 39.5. Go, Jake.
Well, okay, so let's talk about, as we said, Game 1. The line was very similar, but actually, if you liked New South Wales, when we did our preview pod a week ago, you could have laid -7.5. It wouldn't have worked out for you. That line continued to grow by kickoff, 10.5. And now here we go.
Yep.
from Adelaide to Sydney. So advantage Blues, obviously, home ground and home fans, because the fans actually favoured Queensland and Adelaide, and a motivation edge. And here we are with a line that's lower than what it closed in game one. Clearly, what that means is, in everybody's eyes, Queensland exceeded expectations, and Queensland is getting more respect than what they were a week ago. And New South Wales failed to meet expectations and is not seen as much of a juggernaut as they were a week ago. And I know
we should mention as well that this line actually opened just after the game, or the day after the game. It was 7.5, and so obviously
right. And if I have to say pinpoint exactly why, it could be money that just thought the 7.5 was cheap. I think the Brimson scratching was big, and we will talk about the changes in the squads. But let's talk about what happened in game one that we didn't see coming. I'll give you credit. You said you liked New Queensland with the line, but I don't think even you thought Queensland was going to win the game. So clearly Queensland did things that were better than what we thought. And let's maybe put up the changes and put up the game two squad.
Sure.
But talk to me about what you saw in game one that Queensland did better than you expected, and then whether it's repeatable for game two.
Well, first off, I'll start with, I think that the main thing that stood out to me, and I don't know if it's repeatable, is that the Queensland centres dominated the New South Wales centres, which I think no one expected. I mean, everyone was raining shit on Capewell in late inclusion. Everyone's saying Gagai's washed up over the hill. And we all know that Gagai always turns up a little bit more so in Origin than he does in the regular NRL season. That certainly happened last week. And Capewell, in my eyes, was man of the match, even though he didn't get it. And, there were some concerns in regards to playing two out-of-position, centres in that New South Wales side. But even so, I'm not sure if that's repeatable necessarily. I think Capewell was off his head in that game, and he looked like he was hurting towards the end of it. I trust Gagai to step up again, but honestly, Gutho was kept in check massively. There just wasn't any space or any chances there on the right-hand side. And Whiten was kept relatively quiet too. What I will say, though, is that, and I think you disagree with me, Jacob, but every time Whiten got the ball there on the left flank, I thought he did look dangerous. So I think, game two, I think it is going to be a different story, and I would expect the New South Wales Blues centres to outplay the Queensland.
I had the exact same for Queensland. I thought two of the best 5 players on the field were Dane Gagai and Kurt Capewell, and arguably both had a case for man of the match. Now, is it repeatable? Well, Gagai can't play better than that. Capewell has this groin injury. I think he's still questionable while he's named. It's not even certain he would play. It's worth mentioning Brenko Lee would probably come in. So then obviously that would be a downgrade based on how well they played last time. For New South Wales, I did think Whiten was kept very quiet. Is he going to have a bigger game in game two? I can't guarantee it because he also limped off the field. There's a question mark over whether he's 100%. And Gutho, I think he's getting unfairly criticised because, the signature moment was getting fended off for that 50-metre try and stuff like that. But the fact is, he is not a big body in the line, and when that game became an arm wrestle, none of his carries, he never kind of bends the line. He was actually getting pushed back in tackles, and he's never going to be a guy to lay on a big shot. And whereas Capewell did iron a couple of people out.
Yep.
So we never saw Gutho as a strength in the New South Wales side, so that didn't surprise us. But you're absolutely right that the centre matchups was one of the big, factors in Queensland's win. What about just the forward battle? I think it was a surprise to us. You said they could hang, but you would have still thought the New South Wales had the edge in the forwards. It was not the case. As I said, it was an arm wrestle game, and Queensland's forwards had the upper hand. The field position that they were able to achieve got them the opportunities to win the game. Now, what is it going to change? Well, Christian Welch out. He had a great game. So, Dynamis Louis comes in. You have to say it's a downgrade. Cohen Hess has been dropped and Fotuaika comes in. I'm a bigger fan of Fotuaika, so I'd say that's a minor upgrade. On the New South Wales side of things, why did they lose the forward battle? There's several reasons, but losing Murray after one play was a massive loss. Boyd Cordner, HIA, and maybe wasn't 100%. Now, they bring in 3 very different players that all offer a lot. I don't know if have you got both teams up on the screen?
Yeah, I've just got them both. Time? I've got them both sitting in the middle of us. So keep going.
Isaiah Yeo, Nathan Brown off the back fence, Dale Finucane off the Champion Storm. So that clearly will add to the New South Wales forward pack. So again, I don't know. Do you see winning the forward pack battle in game two?
I actually like the changes. It's funny, everyone's shitting themselves. Oh my god, Boyd Cordner. I know he brings a lot of experience and toughness and all that kind of thing to an Origin arena. But you've got some older, experienced guys there in the New South Wales pack. And to be honest, Boyd Cordner's fine. But like people have said, he's just had one too many head knocks, a little bit injury prone. So he's replaced with Angus Crichton, who didn't have the best regular season, but like he's a solid body there. And I mean, look, I love the New South Wales bench. You mentioned it before, Jacob, but like you got Finucane, now Isaiah Yeo and Nathan Brown. And what I actually really do like, you don't have a utility this time around for New South Wales, but I think if you're going by looking at game one, you had the better forward pack on paper, and Queensland hung with you. I think it's a solid idea to just have some forwards there on the bench. State of Origin is so fast paced, and you don't want tired bodies out there in the second half. So I love that. I love that New South Wales forward pack, and I love the bench. Isaiah Yeo has been great all year long. Finucane, obviously, we know what he does. And Nathan Brown actually had a solid season as well. So, if anything, I know it's like injuries and they've had to replace people. If anything, I look at this New South Wales roster, and I think it's better than game one.
I tell you, they wouldn't want to get an injury or HIA in the halves because I don't see
that's right, yes.
Maybe Gutherson could go in and play like 5'8", right? Because he kind of came in and played a bit of 5'8" for the Eels when Dylan Brown went out.
Yep.
And then Isaiah Yeo can probably play centres. And if they get any backline injury, they can shuffle. Gutho can obviously cover fullback or wing if he had to. And Isaiah Yeo, I imagine, or Crichton has played centres. So Obviously you have to have a plan for everything. But let's talk about the other major matchup, which is what won Queensland the game, I feel, was their spine. Yep. So I think Jake Friend was awesome. DCE, man of the match. Munster, fantastic. And Brimson. Now, I don't think any of those players can play better in game two than they did in game one. And obviously, AJ Brimson, as I said before, is out. And I do think Valentine Holmes has to be considered a downgrade.
Agreed.
Based on how good AJ Brimson's form has been, how fantastic he was in game one. And just we don't know what we can get. Like Valentine Holmes' best game, if we're going to go back to like 2017, 2018 form, can be just as good, but like there's no guarantees. Even when he came back for the Cowboys from the ankle injury, played some wing.
Yep.
And then let's talk about the New South Wales spine. They have dumped Luke Keary and they're going with Cody Walker from utility to come in and play the six. And their reasoning, they said, we feel that combination between Cody Walker and Damien Cook is so vital, being club teammates. But you could have equally said like Teddy and Keary is a vital combo. So at the end of the day, I'm not going to say it's a downgrade. In my mind, Luke Keary is the better player, but they know in camp which player is travelling better at this point in time. After a long season, maybe Keary's got some things hampering him. You don't know, whereas Walker's flying around the paddock. So I don't see it as a downgrade.
I don't either. He looked good. He looked good.
And the other part of the spine is a lot of people are saying Nathan Cleary is a bit shook after the grand final, and then obviously they lose game one. I'm not buying into that narrative. I didn't think he was that bad. He had one or two errors. I didn't think he was that bad in game two. So how do you see the spine matchup for this one?
I actually agree with everything you just said. I know that people are heaping shit on Nathan Cleary, but to be honest with you, I really do expect a bounce back. And I know that, when we were talking about, what Queensland thinks, which Queensland players sort of exceeded expectation, Cleary definitely did the opposite for me on the New South Wales side. So I do expect a bounce back from him. I've seen enough from him over the regular season, and a lot of it was just Queensland getting a lot of pressure on his kicking game, and I think that troubled him a little bit. Also, just not having that field position and being, rushed for kicks in your own half did not help him. I think he'll be much improved. But like Cody Walker, his form towards the back end of the season, it was great. He looked good for the 20-odd minutes that maybe it wasn't even that much that he came on in the second half there for New South Wales. And he does add a little bit more of a spark. And, I mean, we're going to get to what we think is going to be more so of the game flow for game two. But, what I will just quickly say, we expected a fast game, a lot of six agains, that sort of stuff in game one. That was not the case. Not one single six again in the second half. I think it's going to be a different story here in Sydney for game two. And I think maybe the New South Wales coaches know that as well, choosing Cody Walker as someone that, benefits from faster play, the ball's more open play than someone like Keary.
If you look at the New South Wales team in totality and you look at guys like Addo Carr, Cody Walker, Damien Cook, that's like a speedster triumvirate right there. Now, if the game is played as an arm wrestle, which we didn't really see coming, but it was in game one, those players are not as effective. And that means that Queensland has a better chance to cover, if not even pull the upset as they did, last week. But I do think, and I'm not going to get like tinfoil hat or match fixing, but I do think the NRL, it's very much in their interest to enforce to the ref, look, you've got to take a stand with the 6 again law. We need this game to be more open because the game one was criticised, because it was a little bit lower scoring, because we went away from enforcing those rules. And deep down, they know if the game is more open and if they do allow, more repeat sets, it's more likely we get a decider. And I think in a season where they've lost a lot of revenue, like, you have to say that the NRL has their fingers crossed that we've got a decider coming up. Now,
it's not tinfoil hat at all. Like, no, I totally agree with you. Of course they want a game 3. Of course they want a live rubber in Queensland at Suncorp Stadium. And, if we're being tinfoil hat, and I don't think it is, but ratings were the worst they've ever been for game 1. And it could have been because it was in Adelaide. It could have been it was the end of the season. It could have been that the game wasn't open enough, And so they're going to try and rectify that game 2. I'm sure they've heard about it all week long, that not 1-6 again call in the second half, where you've been calling them all season long. It was, they've played it, they've called the State of Origin differently than they did the regular season, I believe anyway. So I do think we're going to see a more open flowing game with a few more 6 again calls.
And we agree that favours New South Wales, and I will come out and say I have to lean New South Wales. The current line, 9.5. You mentioned it, open 7.5, and that's significant. That 2-point swing probably makes me going from I would bet it if I could have got 7.5, $2, but at 9.5, I'm just lukewarm on it. And I will say, we talked about what's sustainable from game 1 to game 2, or where will the game be different. There's one other major thing we've got to mention: goal kicking.
Yep.
DCE ain't going to kick, 100% on conversions, while Cleary kicks 33% again. That's clearly going to go back to the mean. And Nathan Cleary, man, I get when you're talking, when you're saying these words, Cleary, and this is clearly this and stuff. It's a bit of a tongue twister, but you guys know that edge goes to New South Wales, and the fact is they are the favourite. They're more likely to be having more shots at goal. And one more thing on Nathan Cleary, I think there could be some truth to the fact he does not have the same command in the New South Wales team as he does with his club team, because there's way less experienced players in the Penrith team. They all look up to him. He's like the 1 or 2 players that have played rep footy, and he's never tentative in kind of dominating a game, whereas at Origin level, let's be honest, he's never done that. And I've just said I lean New South Wales, but I will say what keeps me off alike. I look at their team and I look at the players that I think can win you the game, and I think there's question marks over all of them. Tedesco, clearly 300 metres and 6 tackle breaks last week. He can win you the game, and I don't think that added pressure of captain's going to make him play worse. But I will say, he's back early off a knee injury.
Yeah.
It was meant to be 7 weeks, and he came back in under a month. Who else can win you a game?
He didn't look quite as fast. He didn't look quite as fast cutting and stuff.
I know. And I said this on the recap. I think we expect so much of him that when he's anything less than an A+, we say he didn't have a good game, and he's still the best.
No, of course.
But Jack Whiten, as I said, can he win New South Wales the game? Of course, but he limped off. How do we know how good he's going to be? Addo-Carr, Walker, Cook, it really depends on how the refs call the game. Yep. So you've got to kind of guess the style of game. Nathan Cleary, is he going to dominate? We'll have to see. And then, which New South Wales forward or forwards do you think wins them a game? Because I have to say, Tyson Frizzell has not dominated the NRL this year as much as he has in the past. Jake Trbojevic, I know he was on a struggling club, but I don't think he had his best season either. Angus Crichton came good towards the end of the year, but I feel like he was better in the Roosters' first premiership year and even that last year that he played for the Bunnies. So it's
I'll tell you who it is. It's fucking Isaiah Yeo, fucking cutting through the middle in the second half.
And maybe it is, but still, Isaiah Yeo was not picked in game 1. He's not a player who's a level above others that are out there on the field. Whereas what we saw last week was DCE and Munster and stuff. They played better than any New South Wales player. So that actually keeps me off New South Wales, because I can't be sure that all these guys are going to have fantastic games. But too many other factors, as we said, the motivation, the crowd edge, and the overall superiority in depth in the New South Wales side means I can't play Queensland either catching the points, because there certainly is a scenario where New South Wales gets on top and turns the screws.
Yeah, I think there is. And look, at 7.5, I remember someone commented in the group, the line, was 7.5 the day after, and I thought that was low for New South Wales. And I kind of agree with you. It's a game of inches, this one. I would have taken the 7.5, but at the 9.5, it's like I said, I'd still lean towards New South Wales. But once again, it is getting up there. But I will go back to a point you made about Cleary. obviously had a bad game last week, and you mentioned didn't have quite the same command as he does that Panthers side. You know what? I think that getting Cody Walker in there, I think it's very similar kind of halves that he has over in Penrith. He can be the in-game kicker. Just that you're kind of going to Cleary every time you need a kick in-game. I think that was one of the things that they didn't quite get right in game one, and then, he can kind of leave all the ball-playing crazy shit to Cody Walker, who's very similar to Luai in that way. Another thing, I'll go back to what you mentioned, Jacob. 40-odd thousand people in the stadium there in Sydney for Wednesday night. I will go back to, we've obviously had limited fans at various stadiums throughout the year in the NRL. We haven't really been able to talk about how the ref does get influenced by crowd noise and screaming and yelling, yahooing, booing when there's, a high tackle or whatever. And I think we are going to get that here in Sydney with the packed Blues fans, whereas last week, like you said, there might have been more Maroons fans there. And, it seemed not even like Origin. It honestly seemed like a funeral. There was that much noise coming out of the crowd. So I do think that New South Wales are going to get a few more calls go their way in Sydney, not only because of the crowd noise, but obviously all the other reasons we mentioned already.
I really like the point you make about the halves, because it's just a better dynamic where you've got Luke Keary and Nathan Cleary. It's almost like take turns and take sides of the field.
Right.
Now, no doubt about it, Nathan Cleary's team, Nathan Cleary dominant half, Walker free license to kind of roam, play more left side, but come over onto the right side too, like exactly what he does at South Sydney. That bodes well for the New South Wales attack. What else bodes well for both sides' attack is just the fact they've had the reps now. They've played a game. So it's like what we noticed in the first half of game one, which is why we lost our best bet, was teams were rusty. Teams did not take their opportunity when they got repeat sets in the first half. It's what led to a very low, 10-0 first half score. It opened up a bit more second half. So lots more reasons to like the over, and that is where we've landed on our best bet. And I'll let you add to that and read out the best bet.
Not much more to add to that, but like Jacob said, we're going back. What did your dad say? Look for your money where you found it, and that's what we're going to...
Look for your money where you lost it.
Where you lost it, that's right. Look for your money where you lost it. All right, so we're going back to the well. Like we mentioned, it's basically all the same reasons that we liked the over in game one, but we do have a lot more things going in our favour in this one, and we've gone through all of those, so I will read out the best bet now. I'm going to actually make it... I don't think I can make it larger, but anyway... It's over 6.5 tries for the game. It ends up being $1.85. You'll find that one on Ladbrokes and on Neds. Be quick to get on that one because that is around $1.70 to $1.75 on every other site. So Ladbrokes and Neds, $1.85 over 6.5 tries for the game, and that's the only best bet for Origin Game 2.
Looking forward to it. We will recap that one in episode 3 of Wide World of Punting. If you just want more content and more Origin chat, and you haven't listened to our episode 2, go back and listen to that, because we actually deep dived into game 1 and everything we saw. And as I said, it was an absolute cracker. But look forward to that 7 p.m. Thursday night, where we're going to recap game 2, obviously. And also, what else have we got on that show? We've got an interview with Jake Humphreys, who is the MVP of our group right now with his tennis bets. He's absolutely on fire. So we want to dive into bit more of his insight into how he's picking all these winners for the boys. He's producing a great feed for the boys. And NFL slate tomorrow, week 9. If you follow our NFL tips, you'll know we had a horror last week, but we're still 62% for the year, and we're not timid. We've come out with about 9 best bets for tomorrow's game. So if you want to check that out, it's on our page, and so is our 10 to 15 minute preview of week 9. And also, when you watch this, which is Sunday night, Netty Given Sunday, week 9, will also be available. And I got to shout him out too, because he's also killing it with his NFL tips, over 60%. And he's being even less picky than us every week. He's given out 10 to 20 plays every week. And he breaks down the game in a unique way that only he can. And it's only short videos too. Recommend that. So we've got plenty of content for you guys to absorb and hopefully help you make some coin.
Indeed, guys. Thanks for watching. Enjoy the NFL tomorrow morning. Enjoy Origin on Wednesday night. And we will catch you Thursday, like Jacob said, 7 p.m. to recap Origin and our chat with Jake Humphreys. Catch you then.
Lego.